We continue to share the stories of witnesses, first responders, and survivors of the September 11, 2001 terror attacks that forever changed our country 23 years ago. Today, we are speaking with Dan Holdridge, who was in the Pentagon when American Airlines Flight 77 hit. You're going to hear a man who was feet away from death and has forever changed. He says there are life lessons for all of us, even 23 years later. Were you aware of anything happening in New York before the plane hit the Pentagon?
Yes, I had heard about New York. I was on a conference call that morning, and the person I was speaking to had said, "Hey, did you hear about New York?" And I hadn't. And so she told me about a plane hitting one of the trade centers. And then as we talked further, she was like, "You'll never guess what? There's another plane that hit the other trade center." And I thought, that's horrible. I mean, one must be an accident, but two, I guess that means we're at war.
You use that phrase, we're at war, and you're in the Pentagon where the Defense Department is. Did you feel in danger at all, or did you feel a shift in mood or energy at all?
Oh, yeah.
What was that like?
Absolutely. I mean, the first thing I thought of was, oh, great, I'm in the defense capital of the world. Probably not the best spot to be in when there's a war breaking out in our country. So I did what probably a lot of your audience did when they first heard about 9/11. I called home. I spoke to my dad and I said, "Hey, Dad, I just want to let you know it looks like our country's at war." And he was like, "What are you talking about?" And I was like, "There's planes hitting the trade centers in New York that I don't know what's going on or how, but follow online." But I was trying to convince him as I was trying to convince myself that I was going to be okay. And when I hung up with him, that was nearly the last time I spoke to him.
What happened to you after that?
So once I hung up with my dad, I was up on the 5th floor of the Pentagon because that's where the cell phones could get a signal that worked. Very big building, but thick walls. And so I headed down to the 1st floor, and that's when I caught up with my colleague, Bobby, who him and I worked together with the computer networking. And so we were heading towards the Naval Command Center, where we had been working the last couple of weeks installing their computer networks. And in between the B and the C ring is a wide open area where vehicles can drive around. It's so big of a building that vehicles can literally drive on the inside and to make deliveries. But inside the B and the C ring is a spot where it opens to the sky. And Bobby asked if he could take a smoke break. And I was like, "Go ahead, take one. We'll probably be in there in the command center for a while. I'll just flip open my cell phone browser." At the time, we were having flip phones, not so much a smartphone. And I started reading about New York. And then I looked over to Bobby and I said, "Geez, Bobby, there's got to be thousands of people hurt in New York." I grew up not far from there in Connecticut. And so this is horrible. And then I just paused for a moment. I said, "Geez, what's next? The Pentagon?" And then 3, 2, 1, boom, the blast went off. And it picked me and Bobby up and threw us to the ground and knocked us out. We came to and we crawled through the rubble and were able to escape the explosion area. And that's, once we got out to the center courtyard area, that's when people just started yelling, "You've been hit, you've been hit." And I had no idea what that was. I mean, I was a contractor. I wasn't even in the military. And so I looked down and I saw I was covered in blood and glass and debris and such from what I was hit. But I was alive. And that was it. I mean, I sat down and I just started trying to reach people's cell phones off their waists because they, as they were going by, just my cell phone that I was reading, that flip phone, it saved my hand because a cement came and smashed it out of my hand. And I also had a clipboard that day. I usually didn't carry a clipboard. For some reason, I had one that day. We can call that some divine intervention. And I flipped that up and it protected my face. So I was very, very lucky that day. And so once I got out there, the cell phones didn't work though, because they were all jammed. There's too many calls trying to come in and out at the same time. I believe that happened in New York as well, when the planes hit up there. And so, once we were able to get out of the Pentagon, we went to a triage area, and that's when I saw the very incredible, awful impact of 9/11 firsthand. Is when I'm laying the triage, and they gave us all different colored ribbons. There was green, yellow, red, and black. Green is the one I got, which meant I was going to recover. I just needed some help. Yellow meant they needed some help soon. Bobby, my colleague, we had gotten separated afterwards, we got reconnected in triage. She got a yellow one. Then there was red, where people needed what's called instant surgery. And then there was black, where people had passed on. And so this happened 23 years ago, and I can still remember it like it's yesterday. And that's, if you're ever wondering the impact of what terrorism and what that awful situation happens, it lives with you. And I empathize with your viewers, because you folks knew just 6 years earlier was your Oklahoma City bombing. So you know what terrorism does to a community. And my heart breaks for your community, as I know your community broke their hearts for ours. And so once I was able to get out of the triage, there was a paramedic that came running over and said, "Get out of there. There's a second plane incoming." That plane crashed in Pennsylvania, but we didn't know it at the time. And so we went underneath a nearby bridge. And that's when there was a woman who saw Bobby and I on the side of the road bleeding, said, "Get in, I'll take you to the hospital." And so that was my guardian angel, and who took me to the hospital that day. And it took about 90 minutes for my family to know I was alive. Once I was able to get to the hospital, I was able to commandeer a landline phone and call home.
Let's talk about your book. What do you highlight in there from this horrific experience?
I think with the book, I had to write down what happened, because I was afraid that people would forget. I was afraid that people would not remember the sacrifices that incredibly brave people made. And I wanted to make sure that my son would grow up knowing what his dad went through that day, that I didn't want to miss any of those details of those special things that I saw, where there was heroes within people that they didn't know that they were heroes until that day. And they just decided that they would run up and go rescue people in a burning building, or go donate blood when they needed it most. And so my book, I started with how a clipboard and a cigarette saved my life, how I mentioned earlier, how my colleague Bobby asked for a smoke break and how I had a clipboard. And it goes into details of how my life had become who it was, but 9/11 forced me to stop and reflect on what's most important in life. And I think your viewers, we all have a 9/11 of different degrees in our lives, which force us to stop and think about what's most important. And even more importantly is, what's our purpose? And when that happens, we do a critical life enhancement of what am I going to do for the rest of my life? And you find your purpose when you give yourself to those that need it most. And I found that through my 23 years since 9/11, that the greatest gift that we can give another person, the most powerful leadership skill you can give an organization or a group of people, is kindness. Kindness can change the world. And I think in my book, in my speaking to millions of people across the world over the last 23 years, it's resonated with every audience that nothing is entitled in life. Everything can be appreciated. And if you're wondering why you're not deserving of something, turn that around and turn it into something that you can appreciate. And it's incredible the gifts you'll realize that you always had that you never knew. And it all comes from when you give of yourself to those that need it most. And everyone can be a hero. Use the acronym HERO, help everyone regardless of outcome. Hero. And I found a lot of heroes in 9/11, but what I've also saw is there's a lot of heroes around us every day. Those that are the firefighters, the EMS, the police, the military, everyone that gives of themselves unselfishly every day. Let's take the time to recognize and honor those people. Let's make sure that America is the country that is bringing people together through appreciation. And it's really, really not that difficult to do. But I encourage your viewers to take a few moments. And if there could be a homework assignment, take 90 minutes. 90 minutes that my family had to contemplate whether I was alive or not. And if they were going to find me alive, what they would do one more time with me. And if you could do that exercise at home with your family of what are those things in life that you dream you could always do, write them down and make sure you tell the people that you care about how you feel. The very most important thing I could share with you today is that there's not a September 12th for everyone. And so that we need to live every day with no regrets and never forget what happened on September 11th.
Mr. Holdridge, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it. God bless you.
Thank you. God bless you and all your viewers.